Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Thomas's Reading Room. We're reading Trip Across the Pond, my personal Vietnam experience. Author Thomas Chptr again, that's me, and publisher is Bentworth Press, as you see right here. And unique design that war doesn't start when you're 18 years old. We've gone into a lot of chapters here, and we're now approaching chapter 23, titled Pulled from the Field, Drivers Lose Their Job, and Life is in the Wind. So let's get going right away and not waste any time. With 14 days to go in Vietnam, Captain Colworth had me removed from the field, jungle. It was difficult for me to conceive that there were only a couple weeks left and I would be going home. I could see why the Army would remove a soldier out of the field when they had that much time left. The shorter you got, the more critical everything seemed, and the odds of something going wrong could be estimated at 85 to 95%. On the other hand, it would have been okay with me to stay out in the field a bit longer, as 2 weeks back at base camp would be a real pain in the ass. The first day back at Delta Company, I drove the second lieutenant who was in charge of the company. He was a replacement, fresh from the United States, and he seemed a genuine idiot. A few of us soldiers that were under his authority thought similarly. If you took the second lieutenant's brain and put it in a termite's ass, it would be like throwing a BB in an empty grain elevator. Pulling guard duty was another gift given to me, and again, that was the hardest duty for me to do. A couple of days later, a new rule came down that knocked me out of a position I loved. Officers no longer needed a driver. They could drive themselves from now on. One day you're on and the next day you're off with no time given for preparations. I thought, what a bitch. The same day, that dumbass second lieutenant attempted to take my Jeep away from me. It did not take too long to square that bastard away. He was told by me that I was still duty driver, sidekick, and telephone operator with Captain Colworth, and in due respect to his rank, he could go to hell. The second lieutenant resorted to driving a 3/4-ton truck. Officers were driving mainly Jeeps. They did not have to have a driver's license, nor did they learn how to drive the vehicles. I wondered where the officers would find the time to have the vehicles checked out, plus do the usual driver's maintenance. There were wrecks most every day. One evening, a couple of officers were driving Jeeps, drunker than two skunks, intoxicated with each other's smell, and they ran into each other, totaling both of the Jeeps. It seemed as though everything was becoming senseless, and I was sure glad to be leaving. On the good side, Captain Colworth had me put in for E5, Sergeant Hard 5. There was some sort of problem the first time he had put me in, so he had put me in again. However, I had not heard anything as of yet. Delta Company came back to base camp after being out on an operation. During the course of their 2-day stay, I did much thinking about staying back at the company area. After careful thought and being half loaded, there was no doubt I would go out with Captain Colworth on the next operation. It was the beginning of evening when I went to Captain Colworth's quarters and I knocked on his screen door. "Come in, Dugan." Opening the door and walking inside, I observed Captain Colworth sitting on a chair. He had been looking over some papers. "Hello, sir," I said. There was a slight grin on his face as he observed me, and his eyes showed compassion. "What's up?" "Well, sir, when Delta Company goes out tomorrow, I would like to go too." Captain Colworth gave up his grin, though his eyes stayed trained on mine. "What made you change your mind?" he asked inquisitively. "Well, sir, I'm no chicken shit," I reported like a dummy or whatever. "Okay, Dugan, I'll tell the first sergeant that you are going with us." Captain Colworth gave a soft smile, looked down, then back into my eyes. "Thanks, sir." I turned and walked out toward my quarters to prepare myself for tomorrow. 5:30 in the morning, and fully dressed, I walked out onto the road and stood in formation. The first sergeant looked at me with surprise, like he did not know I was going. The new replacement who replaced me was standing there with a radio on his back. Having the understanding at the time, there was no reason to say anything. I only smiled. After joining the other 3 companies, bringing up the rear, we marched out of the base camp. The only reason for going was 2 battalions could not be at the base camp simultaneously. We would be walking around aimlessly for 2 days. Walking out from a tree line, we entered a clearing. On the right side of us was another tree line that went in about 50 yards. Then there was another clearing on the other side of it. Suddenly, 2 shots rang out, and 2 soldiers were wounded. A few soldiers observed 2 Charlies go into the tree line to the right of us. Quickly, a dust-off was called. 1 soldier received a bullet in the head and died in a couple of minutes. The other soldier received a bullet in the neck, though he was still alive. The dust-off came and the 2 soldiers were put aboard, though after a couple of minutes in the air, the second soldier died. Captain Calworth and every one of us in Delta Company felt strong that being the last company, we could go into the tree line on our right and force those bastards, Charlie, out into the clearing on the other side. We would have some of our soldiers waiting at the other side with a M60 machine gun to pick those bastards off as they came out of the tree line. No big change, as we had over 500 soldiers and every one of us wanted those 2 bastards in the worst way. Captain Calworth called our battalion commander on the horn and requested permission to do the above mentioned. Our battalion commander told Captain Calworth, negative, that we would have to move on. Captain Calworth was pissed incredibly and got into a bit of trouble with our battalion commander over that order. In general, everyone was pissed as we wanted to revenge our brother's death. I thought, sons of a bitch, I would be damned if I would ever walk with the army again. We reached our logger position around 5 in the evening and I was feeling the shits. Having a cold for the past 2 weeks was not the greatest feeling in the world, although I had never mentioned anything about it, as that would do no good. Around there, as long as the soldier did not fall down and die, he was okay. Early the next morning, Walker came over and spoke with me. Then he and a couple of other soldiers from battalion headquarters went over where Captain Calworth was and spoke with him. Walker mentioned to Captain Calworth that being I was so short, time-wise, that it might be a good idea to get me out of the field before something fatal happened. With the experience of yesterday still heavily ingrained in everyone's mind, Captain Calworth sighed and concurred with Walker. It was settled. When we got back to base camp, there would be no more field duty for me. So that night, Walker, a few other soldiers, and I held a ceremony. Taking my much talked about Mickey Mouse watch from the lapel of my shirt, I passed it on to Walker. After using some ceremonial words and Walker's acceptance, we drank a few beers that had been brought to our companies by Chinook. The next morning, we marched through a good-sized rice paddy. One leg would sink to the knee, and by the time I pulled it out, the other leg would sink to its knee. After 1,000 meters of that, and breathing hard, fluid from my nose ran out and down the front of me in globs. Should Charlie had walked down and shot me, it would have been a blessing. He definitely would get no resistance from me. We walked out of the rice paddy and into a tree line leading into the jungle. It did not take too long to figure out that we had walked into an area that had powdered gas mixed in the air. Everyone began putting on their gas masks. Fortunately for me, I perspire heavily and my perspiration washed the gas off my skin. Later we learned it was a kind of gas that collects on your skin. Then when you touch your skin, it burns like someone was holding a torch on that area. It did not take us too long to get the hell out of that area, and we arrived at our next logger position with the beginning of the evening. The evening went slow and without difficulty. The next morning we filled foxholes, policed the area, and headed back to base camp. It sure felt good to get back. The flu or whatever was getting to me. Now that I was back, it meant there would be no more days with Captain Calworth. However, it was best. That is, if I wanted to go on living. October 13th, 1967. How is everything with you? Fine, I trust. Well, I'm out of the jungle a while. We drove in a convoy to Tay Ninh to Po security at the bottom of the biggest mountain in Vietnam. So anyways, we'll get a few letters out and on their way. First of all, I got all kinds of birthday cards from everybody. I received 3 boxes from my mom and dad, plus the birthday cards. Thanks loads. It really made my birthday a warm one and one to remember. Last night I showed my movies with some of my friends. They liked them, but I enjoyed them more than they would ever think of enjoying them. Well, I have 54 days and I'll be home, so keep some whiskey in the jug. Big 23, I'm getting old, but not old enough to think about settling down. I agree 100% that Grandma is not so healthy to be making these long trips, but she is also wise and knows what she is able to do and not do. I plan on seeing Guy when or before I get up towards San Mateo, so tell him when I do to make sure he has enough beer. I should leave Vietnam anywhere between the 8th of December and the 12th of December. Mom tells me that you have been painting Grandma's house. Well, I didn't get drunk on my birthday. We're in the boonies, but has been the first time that I never got screwed up one way or another on my birthday. So that's saying something. Can hardly wait to get home. Think of it all the time. We'll shut down for now, and with 54 days left, right soon. P.S. Short. This is how short I am. Love, Tom. As you see, I drew the helmet and the shoe, obviously short. Okay, so we conclude the chapter, and catch the next chapter, if you will. It's titled Put the Coffee on, Bubbles. I'm Coming Home. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening.